Bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hi everyone, this is your host, Andrew Steele. Thanks for tuning in. Victoria N. Alexander is the guest this week. She's a novelist, a PhD, and a philosopher of science. And we talk in this interview about her latest novel, which includes a character who works for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, along with a character who is involved in the 9/11 Truth Movement. And we talk about fiction and entertainment in general and how budding authors who know about the controlled demolition evidence can move forward and reach an audience without selling out to corporate publishing and abiding by its standards of how it wants the world portrayed. So stay tuned. I'll be playing that interview for you very soon. But first off, I'm going to play a clip for you. This is from Washington Journal on January the 16th of this year. The guest is Representative Marcy Kaptur of Ohio.
Use these resources wisely and sustainably.
Chris is next. Trenton, North Carolina, Democratic caller.
Good morning. First off, just let me say that although I currently live in North Carolina, I'm originally from Northeast Ohio, Kent, Ohio. I'm a retired Army senior NCO with over 23 years of service. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to say that I'm glad to hear that you do not support the TPP. I think that would be devastating to our country. Okay, anyway, regarding appropriations, spending, and waste, my question is this. Congress's refusal to investigate the evidence that Building 7 was brought down in a controlled demolition on 9/11 is based on its blind trust in this WTC-7 report, which has now been found to contain incorrect data about the building design that, when corrected, renders NIST's fire collapse conclusion impossible. Now, as Appropriations Committee member, would you be willing to review the errors in this report and help in seeking accountability from NIST for these errors, considering that NIST has spent over $20 million of taxpayers' money to produce this erroneous report? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would be more than happy to receive information from you, sir, and turn it over to those who have that particular agency under their jurisdiction. I have seen some of the callers who called into programs, and I think you're getting your message through. And as I said earlier, truth will out. Sometimes the government doesn't have all the facts, or there is an effort in some matters to not reveal the facts for whatever reason. But ultimately, if the American people are persistent, the truth will be revealed. So you certainly can send me material, and I will discuss it with those who are in charge of funding those agencies.
Nancy's next.
Folks, the answers are getting better and better. There you have it, a congresswoman not only telling the 9/11 callers to be persistent and that their message is getting through, but saying that in some matters government doesn't want to disclose the facts. All right, this is the kind of answer that these congressmen should have been offering from the very beginning. All right, and they need to hear from all of us, all of the congress people, all of the pundits who appear on that program. And everybody can do this, folks. I mean, even if you got to go to work in the morning, if you're available just during the open line segment of Washington Journal when it's on in the beginning of the program, you can call in and mention Building 7. It's very simple. You don't have to give a long lecture. Here's a perfect example of how to do it. It's from last Monday.
All right, Don. Michael in Miamisburg, Ohio, Republican caller. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd just have two things to say. The first thing about the NSA, I heard a lot of people on your call-ins and that saying, well, they can listen to me all they want because I'm not doing nothing. Well, what about the NSA? Why are they so covering everything up if they haven't done anything wrong? And another thing I'd like to say is about the building number 7 at the Trade Center. There's so many people calling in about this. Why don't you just have the discussion on C-SPAN and let it be drawn to an end, you know?
Okay. All right, Michael, got your point. James, Akron, Ohio, Democratic caller.
See, just like that. Okay, the show starts at 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific. It's on C-SPAN, so if you're up in the middle of the night on the West Coast, give C-SPAN a ring. All right, the numbers are flashed at the beginning of the program. Tell them and the rest of America about Building 7. Don't let them escape it. All right, make it haunt their airwaves like a guilty conscience. And attach it to the end of whatever topic they're talking about during that open lines time, so you can tell the screener you're going to talk about their chit-chat issue for the day, and then just slide the Building 7 issue right in there. All right, point out that it's more important than whatever distraction they're trying to keep everyone focused on. And it's all up to you folks. You got to make it happen. So call in, mention Building 7 whenever you can. In other news, there's an article at the top of AE911truth.org titled, "Don't Miss It, AE911Truth is Gearing Up." And this article encourages you to become a member of the organization for as little as $2.50 a month, and it mentions a lot of the things that have been done and that are going to be done as an example of what you're going to be supporting if you do that. And ladies and gentlemen, they mention the goal of having YouTube ads in this article. All right, think about that. YouTube is huge. I mean, I know for myself, whatever little spare time I have, I usually spend it watching stuff on YouTube. And I guarantee a lot of the listeners here to this program watch their own fair amount of YouTube also. So you all know what I'm talking about when I say that, with YouTube, at least for the first 5 seconds that an ad plays, the viewer is pretty much a captive audience. I mean, if they want to see their video, they got to at least see the first 5 seconds of an advertisement before they can click the skip ad button. Now imagine instead of some dumb product playing for them, viewers all over the world are watching Building 7 coming down. I mean, the building only took 6.5 seconds to fall, so you could see most of the destruction in the 5 seconds that it takes before the skip ad button pops up. Or imagine if viewers around the world see in those first 5 seconds a question popping out to them, asking them if they know that a third tower fell on 9/11. And I'm not sure exactly how the ad will be laid out, but you can rest assured there's people on the AE911 Truth staff who are right now working hard figuring out just the right way to grab the viewers' attention in those first 5 seconds and bring them their eyes and ears and their knowledge to the fact that pre-planted explosives brought Building 7 down. All right, this is the kind of stuff that we all wish some 9/11 Truth organization was doing just a couple of years ago. Well, now this stuff is happening, but it costs money. So that's why you need to become a member. Okay, just $2.50 a month or more if you feel like it. It can go a long way. And it's your way of doing something even if you don't have a lot of time to contribute. And this is the grassroots stepping up, a perfect example of that. This is the spirit of America shining through. All right, so make a contribution. Make your dollars go towards the war of information that we are now beginning to win. You can hear it. You have heard it. The tide is turning, but we can't rest on our laurels. We have to keep on fighting, and we need all the help that we can get from each other. So become a member by going to that article and clicking the appropriate links. You will not regret it. All right, it's Thursday the 24th of January on the night that this program airs on No Lies Radio. Last Monday, of course, was Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States, and obviously I shouldn't have to remind everyone who Martin Luther King Jr. was and how he was, of course, an iconic leader in the civil rights movement. To commemorate him this week, I thought I would share the following quote from Martin Luther King Jr., and the quote goes, "For when people get caught up with that which is right and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory." And how appropriate that we apply that now, not just, of course, to the civil rights movement of the 60s to end segregation, but to 9/11 Truth, to the movement taking place in our time of history to expose the scientific reality that the 3 towers that fell in New York on that day were brought down in controlled demolitions. There is no more right cause than shedding light on what really killed those nearly 3,000 people on September 11th. Obviously, because what really killed them changes the whole nature of the crime and the world that we live in, which has been shaped by the crime. It was mentioned last week on the show that Dr. William Pepper represented the King family in a civil trial in which the jury ended up ruling that James Earl Ray wasn't responsible for the shooting of Martin Luther King Jr., that James Earl Ray was just a scapegoat, and that another guy who was named Lloyd Jowers was responsible, along with other governmental agencies, and what was a more in-depth assassination plot than the public was first told. Well, now Dr. William Pepper has sent a letter on behalf of Tony Zamboti and other researchers to the Department of Commerce calling the National Institute of Standards and Technology out for its fraud in its Building 7 report. And this is the letter that was brought up to Congresswoman Kaptur in the first clip that I played. Well, I'm going to end this segment with an excerpt from a speech given by Dr. William Pepper that he gave years ago. And the clip is audio from a video that was put up on YouTube by North Texas 9/11 Truth back in 2009. I want you all to hear that. Before I play that clip for you and then move on into our interview, I'm going to do what I do every week. I'm going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all of the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that starting now.
So, finally, in conclusion, with all of this, I think 9/11 is the seminal event of our time. It is the event that should radicalize the people of this country. If any one event would, it is this one. It is you who are the torchbearers with respect to that truth. And you have to continue to bear that torch and to try to get it into the mainstream and not be discouraged when you don't. And not be discouraged when you get discredited, when you get attacked, and when you are ignored, because that is the nature always of prophecy and prophets in their own time. I ask you not to mourn the passing of democracy and liberty in this country. Don't mourn it, because mourning takes energy, it's negative. Don't mourn the passing of democracy. Organize. Organize to restore it wherever it's possible for you to do so. Steel your spines, inspire your children, and then when the moment is right, rise again as though from the ashes and rebuild this great land. Thank you.
Victoria N. Alexander is a PhD, a critically acclaimed novelist, a philosopher of science, and she's on the editorial boards of Bios, Meiotics, and Meaning Systems series of Fordham University Press, and she's a co-founder of the Dactyl Foundation in New York City. She'll be talking more about those things. She's just finished a fourth novel. It's a political satire called Locus Amœnus, and she'll probably correct me my pronunciation there, but it has a 9/11 theme. So we're going to be talking about all of her work, her great career here, and other things today, and of course 9/11 Truth. Victoria, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's great to be on the show.
Now, I feel like I just butchered the title of your book. I don't want to do that. Please give me the proper pronunciation.
Locus Amœnus. It's my fault for having an unpronounceable name for a novel. It's Latin. It just means pleasant locale, basically.
Very good. And I apologize. You know, the irony here is I kind of have the George W. Bush syndrome of mispronouncing things sometimes. So I've had guests correct me in the past, but but I want to thank you for coming on the program. And this is exactly what I try to promote our listeners to do, is where you bring not just the scientific evidence, to the general public, but you do it in a creative way, because, some folks are woken up by lectures and by graphs and demonstrations, that kind of presentation, but a lot of folks too, might be bored by that. They might fall asleep watching a scientific presentation. It might go over their heads, but what reaches them is entertainment, is seeing fictional characters in these scenarios. It's the reason that Oliver Stone was so important with the whole JFK controversy and the movie that he brought. And our Olivier, the movie he just made, Operation Terror, that it's not the definitive word on what exactly happened that day, but it presents the whole 9/11 scenario in a way that the viewer can understand, of how they could see some kind of inside involvement taking place. And that is why the arts are so important in any culture, because it's another avenue with which to reach the public and with which to educate a populace about the events of their day. So before we proceed into 9/11 and the future and the books that are coming, your books that are coming out, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your professional background.
Well, I founded the Dactyl Foundation with Neil Grayson in 96 or so, and it's a foundation that tries to bring the arts into the sciences and the sciences into the art. And we had a location in Soho, an art gallery, and we did a lot of lectures and conferences. And in 2006, I was organizing a big conference there, and I had Lynn Margulis speak, and her son, Dorian Sagan. And that was the first time that I heard anything about 9/11 truth. I was kind of out of popular culture, didn't watch the news. I was very busy working on, I had finished my dissertation in 2002 or so, and I was working on evolutionary science issues, and I was reading a lot. I wasn't watching the TV. I didn't know what was going on. And so Dorian mentioned this, that he and his mother had just heard David Griffin speak. And I kind of put it out of my mind for a while, because I thought, somebody else is going to look after that. Those activists and those people who are interested in these sort of things will take care of it, and I'll hear about it later. And then in 2009, I think it was Dorian Sagan again who told me about this paper that had been published, and I was interested in the 9/11 issue, because once a scientific paper has been written, then it's not speculative anymore. It's not something that's being discussed in op-eds or comment sections or whatever. This is, scientific analysis of the evidence, the physical evidence, and that's something that speaks to me. And so I read it. I was reading the paper, and a name drop popped out, Tom Breidenbach, who's one of the people from New York City who provided one of the dust samples for them to test. And I've known Tom. He was involved with the foundation. He's a poet and an art critic, and we worked with him quite a bit. And so I had a very personal connection to this whole story, and it made it very real to me. So I called him up, and we had lunch together, and he's writing a book too, and we talked. And we talked about how, our friends, whom we respect, colleagues at work, behave so strangely when you bring up this topic. They ridicule you. They won't talk to you about it. And just the absurdity of your position as someone who has, researched everything. I've read those 3 phone book-sized reports that the government put out, and most of the reports in response. And your friends have opinions without having done any research, and it's frustrating.
Very much so, and what I find really interesting in what you said, and this reflects so much in previous shows and things I've talked about, is initially you assume somebody else would do something about it. People who were interested would kind of take care of this. but you notice this, and you know, it's sort of in the same way that I did, is that it's not being taken care of, and that anybody that talks about this topic, at least in the early days, would be shut down. And, you know, for me, it was watching Stephen Jones not be allowed to show Building 7 falling on Tucker Carlson's show. That really made me suspicious of the media and really cemented in my mind that, oh, my God, on this topic, the people are on their own. If people don't start doing something about it in their own activism, then this is just going to go into the big black hole of history, and you'll never hear anything about it again. And this is a topic that you cannot let go into the black hole of history. And it sounds like you came to the same conclusion that, well, you know, there's controversy, but someone else is going to deal with it, people who are paid to deal with these types of issues. And then you start noticing how people who are not informed on the topic have already formed opinions on this, and that it's just going into the closet. And I know that's what the establishment would like for us to let this topic do. We're keeping it alive. But so it sounds like
for the moment it's alive because we've had the internet, and that has been our way to communicate. Without it, there would be no 9/11 Truth Movement, I'm afraid. It would go underground. It would be, you know, only known in a few circles, and 50 years down the road, so people would uncover it or something, which is usually how it happens in history. You know, there have been many things that have gone into the black hole of history. You know?
Right, and I even go one step beyond saying the internet. I think user-created content is what really did something about this, because I remember in the dark days of the internet when it was just, you go on Yahoo and then we have a news report, and you go to CNN.com and they have the news report. Even on the day of 9/11, I'm not going to be as bold as to say there was no user-created content, but really when it really exploded was stuff like YouTube, people on MySpace getting together and sharing info with each other, and it really was organic. It came from the people, and then people started making their own music videos, doing their own creative works about this, making their own documentaries, whether it was more creative and artistic or just, you know, factual. It was really the public not afraid to speak out and making their own content and completely ignoring the censors, the editorial people, that they usually sit on the thrones of these mainstream media. I don't call them mainstream anymore, but just corporate media, publications, networks, and all of that. That really changed things. Now, just a quick story for you in the audience. I remember I was in college. I had a professor talking about this. This was the late 90s, saying how the internet is going to change everything, and that you are going to take out that editor, and it's really that's going to result in a big change in history. This was before 9/11, but he had no idea how prophetic he really was. So I know I've watched this evolution, and it's allowed people like you to have more of a voice, and of course people like me, and he lets the audience listen to programs like this one. Now, what did you consider to be the most striking evidence with regard to the 9/11 crime?
Well, the nanothermite paper, that was an analysis of the physical evidence indicating that there were incendiaries in the dust and the iron microspheres. And then, that's the smoking gun. And then you go back, before that you just had a lot of evidence, this looks suspicious, I can't explain this, what's going on here, that doesn't seem right. But the one other thing, when I read the Towers reports by NIST, and I learned that they didn't actually investigate the collapses at all. They stopped their investigation just at, moments before the tops started to fall. When they started to lean, they stopped. And then basically they say, and then the rest of the buildings fell down. And they don't say, how much was the load that was falling? How far did it fall? Did it fall in free fall for a couple of floors? If so, how many floors? What was the amount of kinetic energy that was added to that? What was the capacity of the intact building? No numbers, no figures, no equations whatsoever, and that was a big red flag. So I'd already read the nanothermite paper, and then I read that, and they didn't investigate.
Now, you're an author. You've published many novels here already, more than most people, even people who put out one book or so. You've already got several. Now, yeah, just something I noticed, I brought up the JFK, and we don't get into that topic too often in this book, but what I noticed is Stephen King, an author I grew up reading in high school, and someone who helped me learn how to write just by kind of copying his style. He put out a book. It was a time travel book. Another topic I really love, for science fiction wise, and it was about the JFK assassination, but there's many people who won't read it because it goes from the official story angle. And it got me thinking about this, and we know that there's pressure in the TV industry to avoid certain kinds of topics and to put other kind of topics into the plot lines. From what you've seen and what you know, is there pressure in the publishing industry, the novel publishing industry, to portray the world in a certain way and to not delineate from it?
Certainly, yes. In general, I think my publisher is a small press, and he isn't concerned about what the corporate media world is interested in. He and his editor choose what they like. So, and he's an anti-war activist. So, I don't think that there's any trouble there. But yes, certainly. In my novel, I'm not trying to make any kind of argument or present any evidence or anything like that, or convince anyone of 9/11 truth. I have a character who is involved with 9/11 truth, who's told about it, and it's about his feelings. And the readers don't have to go along with the 9/11 truth ideas. They just get an idea of what it's like to experience that kind of thing, And the great thing about fiction is you get the opportunity to live in someone's shoes for a little while, and have some empathy or some sympathy with someone with whom you may not agree, and so that kind of leaves me open a little bit. I think maybe there will be readers who might not know where I come down on the 9/11 truth issue, because it's not heavy-handed at all. There are different people in the story who have different views.
Yeah, and I think that's very important to do, though. I mean, I've talked before on this show. There was an episode of Law and Order, and it's one of them, the SVU, SUV, whatever. There's like 900 different Law and Order episodes. But there was an episode where they had the murderer be this person who was a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. And the way they portray him, they had him living in a warehouse. They had all these booby traps lined up. He's completely just burned out looking. And he's hanging out, and then they have people who are his friends. One's a woman who, she makes this mention that she's not, off her meds now, or she's back on her meds, and she can't get the detective guy to go out with her, and she's paranoid. She's sitting with her back against the wall. And I have no doubt in my mind that this is done to portray anybody that questions events like 9/11 as somebody that is just completely undesirable, someone that you don't want to hang out with, and they want to plant the seed in everyone's mind so that they know how to treat anybody that when they start talking about this evidence. And actually there's a line in the show. The reason I bring this up is because when the detectives are investigating the murder that this evil conspiracy theorist committed, the professor has some line about and then he started asking are these crazy conspiracy theories about 9/11, and I knew he was done. I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote, but they made sure to stick that in. And I have no doubt that it's done to make people turn their brains off whenever anyone starts talking about the stuff that we talk about on the show, the scientific evidence. They want the audience to look at those over 2,000 architects and engineers as being that crazy kid in the warehouse with all booby traps.
It's a little bit hard, though. They've tried to promote that image of truthers for a long time, but it's a little bit hard when you have someone like Richard Gage and other engineers and architects. They just don't fit that stereotype at all. And I think equally you can also run into trouble if you try to make your truthers out to be heroic, a little bit too unrealistic or not human enough. And my story is set in 2009, but it follows, my characters take the names from Shakespeare's Hamlet. So the 9/11 widow is named Gertrude, her son Hamlet, and Gertrude marries Claudius, who works for NIST and worked on the Towers report. So by taking this familiar story and these characters that people already know, it's easier for me. Hamlet is a really complicated figure in history. Maybe he's the first conspiracy theorist of modern literature. And by conspiracy, I just mean that that he's discovered that there's some terrible secret crime that's been covered up, and he feels betrayed by his family and his friends. And then Claudius is a figure who's not likable at all. He's in my book, he's a bureaucrat. He just goes in and does his paperwork on this particular bolt that he's been asked to analyze how well it does under temperatures and certain pressure. And he doesn't really care what's going to be done with his research in this report. He doesn't care about whatever conclusions are going to be drawn from this data he's collecting. And so, I make the bad guy in the story someone that people don't like already anyway, a bureaucrat and a boring researcher. And Claudius, in Shakespeare's play, nobody likes him. He's greedy and manipulative. And so I'm using these tropes from culture to, already kind of get into the psyche of what people feel about these characters in history, and hopefully they'll have some sympathy for poor Hamlet, who's in this terrible situation.
Right, and that is exactly what the role of art is to do, is to hold a mirror in front of society's face and reflect it in some unique and creative way, and that's what you are doing with this book, and that's why it's so important, because, I made the reference to the Law and Order episode because they want to use art against us, but if art is truly truthful, then it's going to show it in the way it is. And I agree, you have to show things the way they are, flaws and warts and all. I think that you can reach a lot of people just by showing the situation for the way we're living it right now, and show some of the stress that people go through knowing this information and trying to do something about it, and that can do a lot to build a bridge with the general public that is on the fence or doesn't care or has taken the other side in the debate.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing this.
I didn't see the Law and Order episode, but I would say it. Throughout history, propaganda, which is a very, very simplified form of art, is always used by the people in power, and propaganda is very simple. They don't look at any of the complexities, and it depends upon emotional reactions to things, and so they can manipulate people that way. But those things will come and go, and people will forget about that propaganda, hopefully, and it's I think we're going, maybe a lot of artists are going to start looking at 9/11 and looking at the complexity of it and what it's doing to people in our society. And, maybe we'll get richer works that don't take such a simplified view of things, that all conspiracy theorists are crazy. Certainly
right.
There are some that are, just like there's crazy people in every field, but not particularly in this one.
Well, yeah, and see, just the term conspiracy theory, and I'll tell you what, when I talk to just the regular people about this, and they bring up, you're into conspiracy theories, I hate that term, because I feel like I'm being marginalized when people say that. When actually, if you look at the term itself, it's not a bad term. It's just that the establishment has created this term and then added so much baggage to it and used it as a weapon against anybody that calls them out for their deeds, that that now I almost find it to be an offensive term. Even though I'll use it myself sometimes.
One thing we can do, I use the word truther because that is also meant to be a slur, ridicule. And you can take back the term, just use it yourself and, try to take back the term. But I think it's important for the people who are working, the engineers and the architects at A&E 9/11 Truth, is to stay away from the conspiracy theorists because they don't have a theory about who did it. They're, concentrating on the material evidence of what exactly happened to the buildings. And I was drawn to that first before I was drawn to any of the other, theories about who might have done it or why. Because the material evidence is sort of, in a way, the low-hanging fruit. That's there. Either it is elemental sulfur, inside the steel beams, so that elemental sulfur was used, or there's not. That's a yes or no question. And I think that we needed to be grounded in that kind of evidence first, and not try to figure out why. It's strange, though. Most people are interested in the why and the who, not the what. That's just human nature, I guess. We're emotional that way. But I think now that things have progressed and 9/11, the events of 9/11 are being used for all sorts of political ends and economic ends, I think we know why. Clearly, to get to the surveillance state that we've gone to. That was the purpose.
Right, and I think a lot of people, and I've discussed this before, I think they put it through the prism of their own consciousness and what they would do. And they'll say, well, why would they do something like that? And I always kind of retort that, why did the Son of Sam killer kill all those women? Well, his dog told him to do it. Now, that to you and me, that's crazy, but to him, that made perfect sense. I mean, that was the best reason in the world to him. Why not do it? The dog told you to. And it's because, well, my basic point is people are crazy, and you can't always understand what their motivations are. And so when you take that off the table, and you just look at the hard evidence, it becomes clear what happened. Then you get to the why. Now, what's interesting, and we talk about the artistic side of this fight and this movement, is how things have kind of gone the way of propaganda in the past. What I would observe is 10 years, and this is all based on my observations, but I was just watching a movie from 1990 yesterday. It was a really, really strange, weird, psychedelic movie called Jacob's Ladder, but they mention in this about the U.S. government experiments with psychedelic drugs on soldiers, and that's a pretty edgy topic to be putting in a mainstream Hollywood movie. And it seems that at one point edginess and controversy sold, and that is what you saw a lot of, like in the 80s and 90s. I'm talking a lot about movies, but in books, and what really attracted people. And it seems like I said, it was that way when I was young, and then after 9/11, it's like the entertainment in general went and tried to stay away from super controversial topics, like the ones that we talk about every week on this show. And do you think that's because of any kind of, central control, or just mass peer pressure, or just...
Well, one of the reasons why I started up Dactyl Foundation was because the arts, like the fine arts, fine literature, poetry, real stuff, not just entertainment or whatever, was, almost non-existent. It is almost non-existent now because of the, corporate publishers, the bookstores, the distributors are all looking to make a profit, and the genre I write is literary fiction, and it's, kind of difficult to read and kind of experimental topics, sometimes, and a bit edgy. It doesn't have a really big audience, and so most of the publishers that publish this went out of business or just switched to celebrity memoirs or whatever, self-help books. And so, it's not just this issue, it's everything. The arts just pretty much got devastated. And I think what has on the good news is that there were a lot of documentaries produced, as you mentioned before, on YouTube, and a lot of user-produced content, but all informational. You know, it seems like a lot of the good work, you're not seeing movies that are really wonderful and edgy about, these controversial topics, but you're seeing documentaries. There are quite a few of those. If you could spend weeks
and
getting yourself depressed with all the documentaries about all the things that are going on. But yeah, the arts, maybe in music, there's still there's something going on a little bit. As people are protesting with music. Right now, I'm involved with Free and Equal Foundation, which is putting together a United We Stand festival, and they want young people to get together with music because they feel like a revolution can't happen without young people and music. And so I'm on board in promoting that kind of thing because I think that the arts and the emotions need to be there to carry people forward. You got to be motivated, you have to, because it's daunting and tiring and depressing to think about all the things that need to be changed in this world. So, yeah, a little art will help.
Right, and the revolution needs a soundtrack. What is that festival? When is it? What's the webpage for it?
United We Stand Festival, and it's May 10th in Berkeley, UCLA, and you can find them at freeandequal.org.
freeandequal.org. I will check that out. I'll even put a link up on the 911 Free Fall site under this interview so people can check that out. But this is the kind of stuff that people need to do.
Yeah, for my own activism, I've kind of gone beyond the strict 9/11 issues because I feel like that has been so thoroughly researched that you're just adding details at this point, and and the groundwork has been laid. And I think now it's time for us to collaborate with other people and other groups, and the veterans and the anti-war protesters, the YouTubers, the raw milk drinkers, the organic farmers and the open sourcers, the hemp growers and the internet freedom fighters, and all these buy local movements in particular. We all basically have the same problem, and we're looking at it from different angles. And we may think, no, my issue is more important or whatever, but it's all the same thing. It's the a few very powerful corporations, the intelligence industry, the weapons industry, have taken over and control our government.
Now, you mentioned your foundation, and you also talked about your publisher, being an anti-war publisher that takes independent things. And I guess I wanted to make sure I asked this. What about people who are listening, who want to get into the industry, into publishing novels, but they want to do it in their own way, they don't want to compromise, and they want to be more independent? And how can they reach a large audience? What ways that they can do that? What are some networks that they can go through to break through the corporate control?
Well, I think that it's it's a very important model, the self-publishing model, and in the music industry, people have done that a little bit more. They haven't been afraid to record their own albums and make little self-produced CDs and hand them out. It's taken a little bit longer for that to happen in the publishing world because I think that the lack of respect that people have for a self-published novel. It's a little bit different when you're a musical group because there's a group of you getting together and there's some quality control there because at least 5 of you agree that this is okay or something. But anybody can knock out a novel and put it on Amazon and release it on Kindle. So the quality control issue is there. In Dactyl Foundation has put together something called dactylreview.org, and it's just for literary fiction writers to review each other's work or review other literary fiction writers and to help build a readership for their own work by reviewing others. And because there's different kinds of literary fiction. There's experimental literary fiction, or comic, or dark comedies, or whatever. So, if you can build up a readership for your work by helping other writers, then we offer a $1,000 award for every year. And so that's one way that I have been trying to develop this little niche of literary fiction. And there are probably, somebody could take a similar model and do it for other genres, political fiction or science fiction or mystery or what have you. But what we need to do is not rely on, the corporate model. We need grassroots approaches. We need to help each other. We need to build communities, basically. Do it yourself, kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And, work hard and don't expect big monetary returns for what you do.
Right. It's not about the big paycheck. It's about the art. And I'm actually qualified to some extent to talk about this. I was a creative writing major in college, and I know the history of it, and I've read a lot of authors, and I've read their bios, and it seems like back in the day, the John Steinbeck, the F. Scott Fitzgerald day, that was the way to break into it. As you write a short story, there was a place to send your short story to, because there was magazines that published them, and people bought them and read them. So you'd get a check, and you'd be published, and then you might try your first novel, and people already know who you are based on the short stories you wrote in the magazine. Now, though, I cannot find those magazines that publish short stories. I'm not saying they don't exist, but the general public is not buying those things. And so I guess you were talking about the respect of somebody who self-publishes versus somebody who is published by some company. It's because back in a long time ago, and correct me where I'm wrong, but the self-publish meant that you couldn't get accepted by all of these important companies that existed, whether they be magazines or publishing groups. But now that the dynamics change, people have woken up to the corporate control, and they understand that, some topic, like what we talk about here with 9/11 Truth, where you have a story that's sympathetic to 9/11 Truth, to a character, let's say, that's like Richard Gage, may not go well with a corporate publishing house, and that you have to self-publish in order to have an audience.
Yeah. It's almost a guarantee now. If a book is on the New York Times bestseller list, like a fiction book, it's probably not worth reading, in my opinion. Most of what appears, what the big corporate publishers are putting out, is probably not worth reading. And if you want to get some really good literary fiction, you have to go to the small presses. So that's fine with and the small presses are happy because they have a great, stack of wonderful books to choose from. They're not, they've got a lot coming in. The Nobel Peace Prize is no longer respected either because people get it who don't deserve it. So yeah, people are, considering indie publishing, indie music, indie this and that is usually higher quality stuff than the commercially produced stuff.
You are totally right about that. And actually, I get most of my entertainment from things that I find on the internet. In terms of things that are most recently created, I like to watch old movies and read old books. But for anything that I want that is current, I'm going to go to the internet. And there's people on YouTube who make their own movies. And the great thing about the movies that they make is that they don't have to fit within some confines set down by the industry. Like most movies, when you go out to a theater, are like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. But I can go to and watch a movie that's 39 minutes long, and it basically doesn't fill it up with too much garbage because they're just telling the story that they want to tell, and then you can move on to the next thing. So the great thing about the internet, on top of the fact that we're all able to communicate and talk about this massive crime that took place in New York City 12 years ago with the controlled demolitions of the towers, is that people's creativity can shine and they can actually present their works in ways that are truthful and that fit within the confines that they feel it needs to fit within. And nobody's going to stop them from doing that. So you are absolutely right. The quality is so much better when people are independent. And I asked this of the audience, what if you wanted to be a writer or a movie maker or whatever, your first visions of you doing that, were they of selling out to a corporate pressure? Is that what you always wanted to be when you grow up, or is that what you want your characters, you imagine, to be doing when you rewrite a story so that they're not sympathetic to 9/11 truth or something like that? No, your original vision was not about all the fame and fortune. If it was, you shouldn't be in it. Your original vision was to bring your vision to the public, to have people know your characters and to know you through them, and your world and through them, and that's really where you need to be.
Say something important. That was, and I'm not looking for big audiences. I knew that was not a possibility for what I wanted to do, and that's fine with me. I just want a audience. I want a good audience. That's all. I think probably this book might appeal to a larger audience than those that I have done in the past, which were a little bit more. It's always controversial issues. I always tend to write about, take the underdog side of things. But there are a lot of people who are interested in this, despite what you see on the mainstream media. It could be as high as half the people suspect that the government at least covered up, knew the planes were coming, didn't protect the towers, something. Probably half the people in this country are open to hearing about 9/11, I suspect.
Now, I got a question here. This is, when I was a kid, I noticed that it seemed like all the adults in the world were trying to shove the 60s down my throat. On the 60s, and rightly so, because the 60s were a very important time in history, and they would always have these movies or books set against the backdrop of the 60s, and they always make a point of showing Kennedy, giving his moon speech, and Martin Luther King with "I Have a Dream," and all these clips of riots in the streets and things like that. And then there might be the main character might be some boy chasing some girl in middle school, kind of like the Wonder Years, stuff like that. And so, you saw a lot of that from the 60s that uses the backdrop for fictional stories. How much do you think, right now as it stands, the current debate about 9/11 truth and everything taking place is going to impact future fiction that we're going to be watching 20 years from now? Do you think that people, our young people, are being taught to factor that into their creative works? Or, how much do you think it's influencing what we're going to see in decades to come for our entertainment?
That all depends on what happens to the net neutrality issue that's going on right now. Everything, things are completely different this time around. We have never had such an infrastructure in place for collecting everyone's information, knowing exactly who knows what, and who's doing what. And the moment that something happens, if there's riots or major protests or anything like that, those who control the Internet right now, it's the Internet service providers, they have the ability to shut down any website that they don't agree with the content. And so they can stop in a second all this, art that concerns any one of the major issues that are being discussed today about our political situation. I am a little worried that it could go that way, but a lot of people are waking up, and people who you wouldn't think would wake up. The housewife in suburbia now is starting to question her government for the first time, and question the banking industry, or that kind of thing. That hasn't happened. So if they take our Internet away, if they take the neutrality away, and they start censoring things on the Internet, one, will people notice? Because people didn't notice when it happened on the mainstream media, really. They just took it for granted that everything was truthful and everything was being investigated. I'm guilty there too, sort of. So I don't know. Or will people notice that the censorship is taking place, and will they, stand up and fight it? Depends on whether or not people have food in their bellies, I guess, mostly. With most revolutions, it just depends on how comfortable people are.
In closing minutes here, I want to know, what gives you hope? What gives you a positive feeling with all of these clouds surrounding us and the stonewalling from government agencies? What do you see as a sign of hope for 9/11 truth and for the future of America?
Well, I think we can invest hope in collaborating with all these other groups, people against the NDAA or Monsanto or, just all of the groups. And I think people are getting really tired of pointing the finger at the Tea Party or the liberal or, whatever. We have to stop fighting amongst ourselves and start collaborating. And the wonderful thing about America is diversity and tolerance. And I read, there was a Gallup poll a couple of days ago showing that independents are now up to 42%. With just 4% more from each of the parties, the independents will have more than Republicans and Democrats combined. And I think people are going this direction. They don't want to be told to vote for red or blue. They want to know what the issues are, and they want to think for themselves. And that's, the independence in politics goes with the independence in content creation on YouTube and in music and in the arts. We got this. We don't need the corporate model and the super PACs and the big government infrastructure. We can do everything local. We can have cooperatives. We can have communities. And, that is, in my book, I have a community that has done all these things, that is doing all the, the local banking, the local currency, the local beer production and food, growing food. And so I think that's where our hopes are.
Now, one more time, tell our audience the title and where can they get your book.
Well, I just finished it and sent it to the publisher last week. So it won't be out for another year, but it is Locus Amœnus. And if you link to my website, my novels are there, and they can click on and get pre-ordering information or something like that.
And what's your website?
VictoriaNAlexander.com.
VictoriaNAlexander.com, folks. You can check out her books that she's written already. You can see what's coming up and keep track of all of her writings as well. Victoria, thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download the program by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.